after months of basically no comment, or rather a month of no comment on as to whether DLSS was blocked, they've basically come out and said, well, actually, they can do whatever they like. And yet the game didn't launch with DLSS. Supportive question here from Gatti. What's really happening with DLSS on Starfield? Are AMD's comments misinterpreted, or is it a 4D chess move? or what is it? This one from Spudnik. Hi guys, how much do you believe the performance / visual quality of the game is held back due to lack of DLSS support? Obviously not confirmed by Bethesda as of writing this, but I would be amazed if you now told me DLSS is available. Let me dream! ! Well, the good news is that once again, similar to other deficiencies or other things that people are not too happy with the PC version of Starfield, there have been mods, and basically there was a DLSS mod on day one.
Wasn't it like within the hour or something? Like
it was ridiculous. And basically, as we record this, it's launch day, official launch day, September the 6th, and it's now very readily available, a DLSS 3 frame generation modification for Starfield. So I think the good news is that whether it's 4D, 3D, 5D, however many dimensions there are to this particular sponsorship, there is DLSS support for Starfield. Question is, John, is it any good? Because some of these homebrew mods for DLSS have been a bit hit and miss, but I think you're playing with DLSS now, aren't you?
I am indeed. And in fact, it made a gigantic difference to the image quality. So there's actually several different DLSS mods out there, I should note. And some are simpler to install than others. I'm using, I forget what it is. It's the simplest one. I didn't want to use Reshade because that conflicts with Special K. And I'm not using the Pure Dark option either for frame generation because that also conflicts with Special K. So because it uses a weird version of HDR. So the main thing I found is that DLSS or DLAA does dramatically improve the image, especially in specific areas such as neon. There is a lot of the typical visual noise you get in FSR2 here. I actually think FSR2 looks pretty okay in this game by and large. I think it does a good job. It's better than a lot of other implementations of it. They've tuned it pretty well. But there's definitely those areas with a lot of high frequency detail, sharp contrast edges, fine grates and all kinds of stuff in the textures that causes it to kind of break. I highlighted one at the spaceport in my video as well. You saw that, right? Where when the ship's pulling away, like the whole thing is just a shimmery mess. There's a lot of that there. DLSS solves all of it. It's just a pristine looking image. It looks better than just running native resolution with their built-in TAA. Like it's so temporally stable now. You get these super clean, smooth edges. It almost makes the game look super sampled to a degree, especially if you're using DLAA or a high setting on the resolution slider, because fundamentally that's kind of how this implementation differs a little bit in that it plugs in place of FSR2. The resolution slider then functions between 50 and 100%, 100% being DLAA, but you actually have full control over the internal resolution up to 4K or whatever your monitor setting is, right? So you can kind of adjust that to your liking. There's also the sharpness thing. So sharpness is decoupled from DLSS now. And if you want to use that, you actually do need to use Reshade or some other approach to it because the sharpness slider in the game does not apply to the default DLSS. But I think it doesn't really need it. I would say it looks good enough from where I'm sitting, in front of a 42-inch OLED, and I think it looks great this way. So I think Alex is going to have some really good comparisons in there because I basically was like, dude, you got to go over to Neon and compare there. And sure enough, he sent me the whole SpongeBob eye singe meme after seeing it with FSR2. That's one area where it helps a lot to switch over to DLSS.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because Oliver, the FSR2 implementation, it's sort of right. It's not perfect, but it looks fine, I think. Generally, when you look at it on consoles.
Yeah, broadly speaking, it looks quite good. But when you go to neon in particular, like when you
Yeah.
look at long angles of neon and you're looking
Hmm.
at the kind of scaffolding and the lighting, it does start to shimmer quite badly. And I noted this in my my piece on both Series S and Series X to about an equal degree. It also is not perfect with the game's native TAA either,
Yep.
so it's
Yep.
just a tough area for that image quality. In general, though, the game does look, I think, quite sharp and relatively clean with FSR2, especially given that you have motion blur by default. That's helping to hide some of the artifacts that you normally see in motion. For
Hmm.
consoles, I think it's great. Obviously, for high-end PC nowadays, the bar is a little bit higher. So they're,
Yeah.
the DLSS mods, from what I've seen, I haven't played with myself, but from what I've seen, they deliver quite tremendous image quality relative to FSR2 in those areas where FSR2 isn't perfect.
I mean, I thought the image quality on my testing was actually okay with FSR2
Sure.
in quality mode. It does seem to be okay,
Oh yeah.
but I think generally speaking, though, you don't know what you're missing until you see it. And thankfully, the mod seems to, bring the full range of DLSS advantages to the table. There are no drawbacks at all.
Not that I found yet, anyway. Everything seems to work just fine. And like you say, the implementation of FSR2 is quite good. And you might be inclined to think it's perfectly fine. But then when you switch over to DLSS, you really realize, like, oh, okay, all those little edge cases where there was noise in the image or it didn't look quite as sharp or clean or whatever, DLSS takes care of it, which I think does showcase how much more capable that still is. Although FSR2 is, I do think it's pretty good at this point, so I don't want to knock it for that. They've also added support for XESS via a mod. However, I have not tested that because it doesn't make sense to use it on an RTX card, right? But
Right.
I would like to actually see how this game runs on Intel now that it's been updated, I think, to work, because I
Yeah.
believe it's launched in a state where it didn't run on Intel's ARC cards at all.
Yeah. Well, that's something that we're looking into and trying to get some answers on, which is visibility that the IHVs had to the game pre-launch, bearing in mind it's a sponsored title. Because we've heard stories in the past about, well, basically, the way a day one driver comes about, it isn't that NVIDIA or AMD or whoever get the game on day one and just twiddle some knobs and put a new driver out. It takes time, right?
Yeah.
And for that, they need access to the game in its early stages or pre-launched by a good degree of time to get to grips with it, right? And I can understand if it is a sponsored title and there's bespoke integrations, right?
Sure.
That one vendor would probably not want the others to see those integrations, right? So I can imagine that is possibly what happened here. Who knows? But the point is that if a game like of this stature launches and you're not getting optimum performance from your GPU, I'd say that's arguably worse than locking out vendor specific features like DLSS, because it's really not great. But that's something we're just going to have to talk about and try and dig into a bit more and try and get some comments from the IHVs.
Do want to comment though on this game specifically. So we obviously were talking about this like lack of DLSS pre-launch, and lo and behold, it didn't turn out to be an issue thanks to modders. And I want to point out that is one of the key strengths for Bethesda sticking with Creation Engine, is that the moddability for this game is just off the charts. That's what has allowed these games to continue to remain popular for so long. Like, all the modding community is built around this, the tools that they provide, everything that they offer. It's such a moddable game in a way that a lot of games aren't, right?
Yeah.
And you can see that straight away. Like, yeah, there is an argument to be said that maybe Bethesda should have implemented all these different things themselves, but at the same time, this modding is something that's really built. The game is built for this, to be modular.